Imagine this. You walk into a lively gathering, a buzzing place where voices overlap in endless chatter, where laughter fills the air, and where people are completely absorbed in their social exchanges. Everywhere you look there are smiles, handshakes, and animated conversations that many would describe as the pure essence of human connection. It seems like the perfect scene of togetherness, an event where people strengthen their social bonds and indulge in what they believe to be meaningful relationships. But then, shift your gaze to the periphery, where a lone figure stands apart from the crowd. Unlike what you might expect, this person is not anxious, awkward, or lonely. Instead, they appear completely indifferent to the spectacle before them, lost in thought, their mind occupied with something far more compelling than small talk and pleasantries. While others are captivated by light-hearted banter and social energy, this individual remains detached, uninterested in trivial conversations, unbothered by the excitement that seems to enchant everyone else. Why is it that intelligent people often appear disengaged from social life? Is it arrogance, introversion, or something much deeper? Could it be that intelligence itself naturally leads to a preference for solitude? And if so, why? To uncover the truth, we turn to the profound insights of Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most brilliant yet unconventional philosophers of the 19th century. His perspective on intelligence and social interaction challenges everything we have been conditioned to believe, and by the end of this exploration, you may discover that your own relationships are not what you once thought they were. Schopenhauer argued that intelligence and solitude are deeply intertwined. The more intelligent a person is, the less they feel the need to rely on social interaction for stimulation or validation. Their minds are already overflowing with thoughts, questions, and ideas, making external distractions unnecessary. In his seminal work, The World as Will and Representation, Schopenhauer explained that the average person seeks company because their mind feels empty when left alone, whereas highly intelligent individuals inhabit an internal world so vast and stimulating that solitude itself becomes a source of joy rather than loneliness. This flips a fundamental belief we hold about human nature. From childhood, society teaches us that making friends, being sociable, and constantly engaging with others are essential for happiness. Those who prefer solitude are often viewed as missing out, abnormal, or even flawed. But history tells us a different story. Isaac Newton, Nikola Tesla, Emily Dickinson, Franz Kafka, and even Schopenhauer himself often distanced themselves from the noise of society. Were they miserable? Or did they simply understand something most people overlook? According to Schopenhauer, socializing is not an inherent human need but rather a coping mechanism. He believed people who crave constant interaction do so because they cannot bear the silence of their own minds. Most conversations, in his view, are filled with trivialities, gossip, and meaningless chatter that serve no real intellectual or personal purpose. The intelligent person, by contrast, is self-sufficient. They do not seek companionship out of necessity but rather choose it selectively, only when it aligns with higher purpose or genuine value. And here lies the critical reflection. Have you ever felt drained after social interactions, even when everyone else seemed to enjoy them? Have you noticed that while others thrive on socializing, you often leave exhausted, as if your energy has been depleted rather than replenished? If so, you are not alone. Many highly intelligent individuals report detachment from social life, not because they dislike people, but because they see through the illusion of social necessity. Some may argue that humans are social creatures by nature, evolved to depend on groups for survival, protection, and emotional support. This is true, Schopenhauer admitted, but only to a practical extent. For him, social structures help with survival in the external world, trade, cooperation, security, but they do not necessarily lead to inner fulfillment. In fact, he argued that excessive socializing often distracts us from true personal growth. People with little intellectual depth, he claimed, are like empty vessels. They require external input, conversations, entertainment, social validation, to feel complete. But those with rich inner worlds do not need such constant stimulation. Their thoughts, creativity, and imagination provide endless engagement, making solitude not only desirable but essential for their intellectual and emotional well-being. This challenges one of the deepest assumptions of modern society, that being social is a virtue in itself. But is it really? Or is it simply a way to avoid the discomfort of being alone with one's own thoughts? Schopenhauer also pointed out another problem with social life that intelligent individuals quickly recognize: conformity. In social settings, people follow predictable scripts, adhere to norms, and suppress their authentic selves to fit in. Highly intelligent individuals, however, often refuse to conform. They prefer authenticity over acceptance, depth over superficiality, and truth over politeness. This refusal to play by society's rules makes them outliers, often misunderstood or unfairly labeled as antisocial. Yet, their distance from shallow interaction is not born of disdain but of clarity. They recognize that much of what society calls connection is nothing more than repetitive patterns of behavior driven more by habit than genuine meaning. But this raises the ultimate question: if intelligent people gravitate towards solitude, does that mean social life has no value for them? Schopenhauer's most powerful insight reveals that while solitude is the natural habitat of intelligence, it does not entirely exclude social engagement. The difference lies in intention. Highly intelligent individuals choose meaningful connections over obligatory ones. They value quality over quantity, depth over breadth. For them, relationships are not about filling a void but about expanding truth, creativity, and self-awareness. And this is where the line between solitude and loneliness becomes clear. Loneliness, Schopenhauer argued, is the suffering of those who fear their own minds. Solitude, on the other hand, is the reward of those who find joy in their own intellectual richness. By recognizing this, we begin to understand why social interactions feel draining to some and energizing to others. For the highly intelligent, solitude is not an absence of connection but the deepest form of connection, with the self, with ideas, with truth. And perhaps this is the final revelation: social life, as society defines it, is not the ultimate measure of happiness. For those with vast inner worlds, the truest fulfillment lies not in being constantly surrounded by others, but in being deeply at peace with one's own mind. In Arthur Schopenhauer's view, loneliness is a condition that arises from a lack of fulfillment, while solitude is a state of self-sufficiency, and this distinction explains why intelligent people often seem detached from social life. The majority of people fear being alone because they associate it with emotional emptiness, but an intelligent mind does not experience solitude in the same way. In fact, Schopenhauer believed that solitude is not only beneficial but essential for those who seek wisdom, self-reflection, and personal growth. If you pause to reflect, have you ever been surrounded by people yet felt completely disconnected, or engaged in a conversation only to realize it held no real meaning? This is precisely the awareness Schopenhauer described, the recognition that much of social life is built on superficiality rather than true intellectual or emotional connection. Society conditions us to believe that being alone is unnatural, that isolation is something to be avoided at all costs, but Schopenhauer argued that solitude allows for the deepest forms of thought and creativity, while constant socialization prevents true introspection. He even declared, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. If he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom," a radical insight suggesting that the constant need for social interaction is often nothing more than dependency, an inability to be alone with one's own thoughts. The intelligent person, however, embraces solitude because it grants them freedom, the freedom to think, to create, and to understand themselves without external influence. History supports this perspective. Isaac Newton spent years in isolation while developing the theories of motion and gravity. Nikola Tesla chose a life without marriage and dedicated himself entirely to his inventions, and Emily Dickinson rarely left her home yet produced some of the most profound poetry ever written. These individuals were not miserable or socially incapable, they were immersed in the richness of their own minds. Yet Schopenhauer also pointed out another reason intelligent people often distance themselves from social life. Most human interactions are not driven by genuine exchange of ideas, but by social expectations, ego, and even hidden competition. In many conversations, people are not searching for truth but for validation, approval, or an opportunity to showcase themselves. This can be deeply frustrating for those who value intellectual honesty and authenticity. Think about it. How many conversations in your daily life feel truly meaningful? How often do you encounter people who listen more than they speak, who want understanding rather than attention? For highly intelligent individuals, shallow interactions feel like a waste of time. They see through the masks people wear, the way personalities shift to fit social norms, the avoidance of uncomfortable truths, and the pursuit of approval over authenticity. Schopenhauer argued that intelligence naturally heightens awareness of these dynamics, and the more a person becomes aware, the less willing they are to participate in them. This explains why intelligent people often feel like outsiders. It is not arrogance but simply that their way of thinking is different, deeper, and less aligned with the scripts of conventional society. But this recognition raises a difficult question. If social life is dominated by superficiality, should intelligent people isolate themselves completely? Schopenhauer's answer was nuanced. He did not claim all social interactions are meaningless, only that most of them are, and he suggested selectivity as the solution. Rather than rejecting society altogether, intelligent individuals should deliberately choose relationships based on genuine intellectual and emotional connection, not mere obligation or convenience. He also distinguished between healthy solitude, which leads to growth and reflection, and destructive solitude, which stems from bitterness or alienation. True wisdom, he warned, comes not from contempt for others but from understanding the nature of society while remaining detached from its illusions. This balance allows intelligent individuals to embrace solitude without becoming entirely disconnected. Schopenhauer's philosophy leads us to a striking realization. Most human relationships are not based on substance but on mutual need, habit, and circumstance. Friendships often form because of convenience, shared schools, workplaces, or neighborhoods, but when circumstances change, many bonds fade because they were never rooted in genuine understanding. Intelligent people recognize this pattern and become highly selective, investing only in relationships with authenticity and depth. To them, this is not cynicism but liberation. By abandoning the pursuit of social validation, they become free to build relationships on truth rather than dependency. Schopenhauer himself was skeptical of the belief that being well-liked or socially popular was proof of intelligence or fulfillment, noting that the most profound thinkers in history often stood apart from society not because they were excluded but because they chose a different path. Leonardo da Vinci, Nikola Tesla, Emily Dickinson, Franz Kafka, all preferred solitude not out of weakness but because their inner worlds demanded space free from distraction. They were consumed by their pursuit of knowledge, creativity, and truth, and in this pursuit, they found more meaning than casual socializing could ever provide. What intelligent individuals seek is not social validation but wisdom. The highest form of existence, according to Schopenhauer, lies in knowledge, introspection, and mastery of the self. For them, contemplation is more valuable than idle conversation, and truth is more precious than popularity. This is why they often distance themselves from the noise of society, not because they despise people, but because they refuse to sacrifice clarity for conformity. Much of social life, Schopenhauer believed, revolves around performance, where people curate identities, filter their words, and suppress their true selves to fit in. Intelligent individuals see this as exhausting because, with clarity comes intolerance for illusions. Yet, Schopenhauer did not argue for abandoning society entirely. Instead, he emphasized approaching social life without attachment, engaging when useful but never depending on it for fulfillment. Intelligent people may prefer small, meaningful conversations with those who challenge them intellectually rather than large gatherings filled with surface-level chatter. And here lies the paradox. While they withdraw from much of social life, they are also the ones who understand human nature most deeply. Their solitude is not rejection but perspective, a way to step back and observe the world with clarity. Ultimately, Schopenhauer's most powerful insight was that true fulfillment comes not from external validation but from within. Most people chase happiness through relationships, status, and entertainment, only to find their satisfaction temporary, replaced by new cravings. Intelligent individuals, however, see through this cycle and turn inward, cultivating inner richness, through reading, reflection, creation, and the pursuit of truth. To them, solitude is liberation, not loss. Modern society struggles with this because we have been conditioned to believe that social connection is the highest form of fulfillment, but Schopenhauer forces us to ask, is it really? Or is this simply fear of solitude disguised as virtue? If the greatest minds in history embraced solitude as the path to wisdom, perhaps the true measure of intelligence is not social success but the ability to be alone without feeling incomplete. And this realization is transformative, for it suggests that highly intelligent people do not reject social life out of arrogance but because they have discovered something far more valuable, the power of independent thought, authentic creativity, and fulfillment that arises not from the presence of others but from the cultivation of the self.